So we are holding today on Daf Nunvav Amud Aleph. So that's the Amud that we're doing today. Very top where it says Echad HaMehara Echad HaGomer Kana. Huh?
A little bit X-rated.
So the Mishnah said that with all these types of biyas that are not necessarily l'shem mitzvah, biyad shogeg and ones, etc., he's still kona the yevama. Now, if somebody does yibum and he's shogeg or ones, he's kona the yevama. Now the question is just important background information to know that there are certain things that it says in the parsha of Yibum, right? We learned from the pasuk. The pasuk said, Yevama yavo alea. We said lerabot shogeg kemezid, that even if biat shogeg is considered like mezid when it comes to Yibum. Question is that only with regard to the things written in that section of Yibum, meaning he's going to make it that she's pitura from Yibum and Chalitza, and he's also going to make it that
Is there Megillah for it?
there's a parsha in the Torah. Whatever, it's a few psukim, yeah. Ki yeshu achim yachtav, umet echad mahem, uben lo, etc., etc. It's 4 or 5 psukim, whatever it is. So the question is, when we say bia of shogeg is good, it does is that he's kone the yevama just for the things written there, or in general for everything he's like a wife? So
What kind of beer is shogeg?
Rashi said that he thought that he was with his wife and he didn't realize it was the yevama. He went to the room, he thought his wife is gonna be there, really was his yevama over there, and he was shogeg. Even if he's shogeg and she's mezid, they're both shogeg. Any case where bia happens, he's kone the yevama. So kana, he's kone. So my kana, what does it mean that he's kone? So machloke Rav and Shmuel. Rav amar kana lako. Rav says very top of Nunvav Amud Beth, 3 lines in. My kana, Rav amar kana lako. Rav says that he's kone the yevama for everything, meaning even if this guy is a kohen, she will eat truma. She's considered his wife fully. Ushmuel amar lo kana ela lidvarim ha'amurim b'parsha. Shmuel says no, he's only kone her not 100% as a wife with regard to everything. For that he needs a real bia, not shogeg. The bia of shogeg only is kone her for the things that are written in that parsha of Yibum, which is liresh benichse achiv, that he's gonna be yoresh his brother. Ulpotra mina yibum, and that now she doesn't need to have yibum done anymore. This counts as a yibum, but still he cannot. If he's a kohen, she cannot eat truma. Meaning he's not 100% fully koneh her as a wife. So now the question: we have to know that yibum happens. There's yibum if somebody does kiddushin to a woman and he doesn't have chuppah yet, and he dies. There's yibum. Also, if he does, of course, if he's fully married and he has chuppah with her, there's also yibum if he dies. But you have yibum from both. Now the question is, this machloket Rav and Shmuel, which case are they talking about? So the Gemara is gonna have both approaches. First, the Gemara says, mina nisuin ledivrei akol achla. Everybody would agree if the first husband, the brother who was niftar, was fully married to her. He did kiddushin, he did chuppah, they were fully married. They were 100% married.
The original husband.
Original husband did chuppah with her, right? And then
kosher.
Yeah, and she was now eating truma because she was the wife of a kohen. And then this guy passes away, so now she can't eat truma anymore. If the husband passes away and she's not a bat kohen, she cannot eat truma anymore. And then the yavam does one of these types of bias that's not a full bia, shogeg bia, right? In that case, everyone agrees that she would eat because because she was originally eating under her first husband. She was eating truma. So here also, even though it's a bia of shogeg, that's what the Gemara is suggesting now. The Gemara is going to bring a different version of this, but that's what the Gemara is suggesting now. That if she was fully married to the first husband, there's no machloka between Rav and Shmuel. Everybody agrees that even if the Yavam just does bia of shogeg, or a bia of znut, or whatever it is, he feeds her truma. So kipligi, when a Rav,
Yavam could do bizunut.
meaning he doesn't have kavana for yibum. Hey, that was the first Mishnah in the parak that we did. We said Habal Yevamot ben b'shogeg ben b'mezid ben b'onet. Ideally, he's supposed to, but even if he doesn't, even if it's shogeg or zunut or this,
kind of bia.
correct. Yeah. It all works. It all works. He doesn't have to have kavanah. But it's a chidush in the Torah that those types of bias work to make a kinyan. When a person is actually marrying a woman, right? There needs to be a bia of, it can't be ones or if a person's mekadesh a lady, bia of ones or bia of znut is not going to work for kiddushin, but it still works for yibum. That's the chidush. So kipligi, when are Rav and Shmuel having a machloket? Mina erusin, when the first husband, the original husband, was not fully, he just was mekadesher. He wasn't fully married. There was no chuppah, there was just kiddushin. And the halacha is that when a woman marries a kohen, when she just has kiddushin to the kohen, she can't eat truma yet. Because we're worried that, if she until when she just has kiddushin, she's still living in her own house. So if she's going to eat truma in her own house, we're worried, somebody's going to open the refrigerator, her brother, her father, and they're going to take the food. They're not going to realize that it's truma. So we say that she's not allowed to eat truma until she's married to the kohen, until she's fully married. Kiddushin is not enough. She has to have chuppah and actually live with him. So the Gemara says the machloket is mina erusin. When she has just kiddushin, in which case she's not eating truma under the first brother, and then he passes away, and the second brother does this type of yibu. In that case, Rav Amar Ochelet, Daha Rabbi Rachmana Biat Shogeg Kemezid. Rav says that she eats truma, because the Torah says that shogeg is bia of shogeg works for yibum, so it should make it that they're married now, and now she's married to this yavam, and she should be able to eat truma. Ushmuel Amar Ki Rabbi Rachmana leukma b'mkom baal la'alu memi baal lo. Shmuel says no. The whole point of the Torah that it says that by yibum, if the person has a bia of shogeg, that's good enough. That's only to make it that the guy takes the position of the husband, but not to make it greater than the husband. Over here, the husband didn't feed her truma, so the yavam also shouldn't be able to feed her truma with this type of bia. It has to be a real type of bia for a full kinyan. Vazda Shmuel letameh, and Shmuel is going according to his own reasoning. Da'amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, Kol shahabal ma'achil yavam ma'achil. Right, we have Rav Nachman said this in the name of Shmuel, that any time the husband were to be able to feed her truma, the yavam would feed her truma. V'chol she'ein habal ma'achil, yavam eno ma'achil. And if the yavam is not going to feed her truma, if the husband is not able to feed her truma, the yavam will not feed her truma. So in this situation, the husband was not feeding her truma because she was only mikudesha to him. So when the yavam takes over, he's also not going to feed her truma until he does a full bia of a kinyan that would be a kinyan according to everybody. Okay, so that's the machloket Rav and Shmuel. So right now we're saying machloket is, the case of the machloket is that the first husband was mekadesh a lady, he was a kohen, he's mekadesh a lady, and then he's niftar, and the yavam does a bia, but not a full 100% bia, just a bia that's a shogeg bia, which works for yibum. The question is, does it also work to feed her truma? Machloket Rav and Shmuel. So Meitive, the Gemara asks a question on Shmuel really. Bat Yisrael pikachat shenit arsa lekohen pikeach. So cases like this, you have a Bat Yisrael who she got engaged to a kohen. She accepted kiddushin from a kohen, And at the time of the Kiddushin, they were both 100% mentally there. Their dat was there. What happened? Something happened. The Kohen became a cheresh. He became somebody who in halacha doesn't have dat to make a complete kinyan. And he had chuppah when he was a cheresh. So that chuppah didn't really make a kinyan because he was a cheresh. He at the time
everything at the chuppah it was normal.
At the time of kiddushin, everybody was 100% normal. At the time of chuppah, he became a cheresh. So essentially, the chuppah didn't really accomplish anything because he wasn't bar dat. So what is this? Is a braita that we're gonna we're bringing this braita. We're gonna ask on Rav and Shmuel. So she's not allowed to eat truma because that kiddushin, that chuppah wasn't a real chuppah. Met. Now let's say this person was niftar, this kohen was niftar, and she fell to his brother who's also cheresh. Okay, so ochelet, then she's allowed to eat. Once she does yibum with the thing, she's allowed to eat with that brother. And in this case, you see that the yavam is stronger than the husband because the husband, his chuppah wasn't able to make her eat truma, but the yavam, his bia is able to make her eat truma. That's what the Braita says. So now this is going to be a question on Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Bishlama Rav Nicha. According to Rav, there's no question because Rav said that the yavam's bia is, even though the bia may be a lousy bia, it's a shogeg, it's ones, but still, we view it 100% as a bia, and it makes them fully 100% married. So that works according to Rav. There's no question here. El Shmuel kasha, but according to Shmuel, that says no, that bia is only good to be koneh her as a yevama in terms of he just inherits the brother and she doesn't require yibum anymore, but not to feed her truma. So why is she being fed truma in this case? This is a case where it's like mina nisuin, mina erusin, right? She just has kiddushin to the brother, and then the brother passes away, and then the yavam does yibum. According to Shmuel, she should not be eating truma. So Amar lecha Shmuel. So Shmuel will tell you, ema hachi. You have to read the Braita, say it like this: Lo hispik lekonsa ad shenitcharesh. The case is that you have to add in a few words, right? If the Kohen first he did kiddushin when he was normal, and then lo hispik lekonsa ad shenitcharesh ena ochelet b'truma. If he did yibum, if he became a cheresh before the kiddushin, before the nisuin, she doesn't eat truma. Kanas v'achar kach nitcharesh. But if he first did the nisuin when everything was good, he was normal for the chuppah also, and then afterwards he becomes a cheresh, then then if she falls in front of, she does yibum, she eats truma. Meaning Shmuel is adding some words to clarify, to change the case a little bit. He says the case is that, yeah, you're right, there's two cases here. One case is the Kohen first, he everything is normal, he does kiddushin, then he becomes a cheresh, and then he does chuppah. Oh, in that case she doesn't eat truma because a chuppah of a cheresh is not strong enough, it's not good to make her be his wife fully to feed her truma. But when it comes to the second case, Shmuel says there's a second case here that we're adding. If he first does the nisuin, then they're fully married and everything is normal, and then afterwards he becomes a cheresh, and then he passes away, and the yibum, she falls to yibum to the brother and he does yibum. In that case she eats truma. That's the case that we're saying that she's going to eat truma. So it's not a question on Shmuel anymore. Meaning, originally we asked a question on Shmuel because we were under the impression that the case is that first he does kiddushin, everything is normal, and then he became a cheresh. and now he's not feeding her truma, because even if he does nisuin, that nisuin is not strong enough to feed her truma. So for sure the yavam can't feed her truma. But what Shmuel is doing is he's saying, no, that's not the case. The case is that he first did kiddushin, everything was normal. Then he did nisuin, then everything was still normal. And then afterwards he became a cheresh. Only after he did nisuin he became a cheresh. So she was already eating truma, and then she falls to the yavam. In that case, the yavam feeds her. So therefore, it's not a question on Shmuel anymore.
Cheresh is going to change the status?
What being a cheresh does makes it that it cannot make a kinyan. But if he already made the kinyan on her,
because they're capable to do it.
Because he doesn't have dat. In halacha, he doesn't have dat. Cheresh is not like somebody today that wears a hearing aid. That's not called a cheresh. Cheresh is somebody who doesn't have dat. He has no way to communicate. He cannot hear. He cannot speak. He has no way to communicate. So somebody who has no way to communicate, in halacha, it's considered like they're missing dat. They don't have dat to be able to make a kinyan if they cannot communicate. So, in a world where I'm saying there's no other forms of communication. Okay, so the where are we up to? So Shmuel says we're adding some words here. The case is that he first did, everything was normal. He first was kones. He first did chuppah, and then afterwards she became a cheresh. He became a cheresh. So she's able to eat truma in that case, because once she started to eat truma, the kinyan was a good kinyan. So that which he became a cheresh afterwards, that doesn't change her ability to eat truma. And in that case, in that case, if she falls to yibum to the cheresh, then he also will feed her truma, because the husband was feeding her truma. So this is good for Shmuel too. This works with Shmuel also. Umay bezu. What does it mean when it says, and in this case the yavam's stronger than the husband? How is the yavam stronger than the husband? Because by the husband, if the husband does the kinyan when he is a cheresh, that's not good enough. Vilu yavam cheresh meikara achla. But if the yavam does the kinyan, does the yibum when he's a cheresh, that works. That was all one version of the machloket between Rav and Shmuel. So now the Gemara says Ika da Amri. The Gemara says there are those that have a little bit of a different version of the machloket Rav and Shmuel. Mina erusin dirakol lo achla. That some have this version, that both Rav and Shmuel will agree. Again, what was the machloket Rav and Shmuel? The machloket was that when a person does yibum and they do a bia which is not super good bia, it's a bia of shogeg or mezid, they had intentions of znut, or they didn't even realize that this was the yevama, they thought it was their own wife, or some bia like that, we had a chidush that's koneh for yibum as well. So the question was, Rav said that's koneh 100%, and Shmuel said no, it's only koneh with regard to she doesn't require a different yibum, and he steps into the shoes of the brother in terms of the being yoresh the brother, but they're not 100% married in terms of him being able to feed her truma if she's a kohen, etc. So Ika da Amri.
Wait, so what would he have to do after that?
He would have to do, according to Shmuel, he would have to do a real full bia with intention of yibum to make it that they're fully married. So Ika da Amri. Mina irusin divrei kol lo achla. So this Ika da Amri flips it a little bit. It says that everybody would agree if the first husband was just mikadesh her, in which case she wasn't eating truma under him, and then he passes away, and then the yavam comes and he does some type of bia of shogeg. So everyone agrees in that situation lo achla, she won't eat truma. Why? Because she wasn't eating truma originally under her first husband, because there was no nisuin, there was only a kiddushin. So she wasn't eating truma under her first husband. So in this case, everyone agrees the yavam won't feed her truma unless he does a full 100% bia. Kipligi mina nisuin. When are they arguing? They're arguing about a case where the first husband was fully married to her, and then he passes away. Right? So he was fully married to her, she was eating truma. He passes away, she's no longer eating truma. Now, the brother comes and does yibum, but he does some type of bia of shogeg, some type of not so great bia. So Rav Amar Ochelet. Rav says that's good enough. She can eat truma. Because she was eating truma originally. Mm-hmm. So this type of bia is good enough, and she's able to eat truma. Shmuel Amar Eina Ochelet. Shmuel says that no, she doesn't eat truma. Right? Ki Rabbi Rachmana biat shogeg kemezid l'dvarim ha'amurim b'parasha. When the Torah says that this chidush, that a bia of shogeg is good for yibum, that's only with regard to that which it's written in the Torah about yibum, that she doesn't require another yibum, and he takes over the position of the brother in terms of inheriting the brother. But not that they're 100% married and he's able to feed her truma. Right? Aval kol mili lo. But with regard to all other things, all other matters, that type of bia is not koneh her. So V'ha'amar Rav Nachman, the Gemara challenges this version because it says the Gemara V'ha'amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Kol shehabal ma'achil yavam ma'achil. Right? They said Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel that any time that the husband would feed her truma, so if the yavam takes over, he would feed her truma as well. So now we're saying that Shmuel says isn't saying that. Right? According to the version we're saying, the yavam fed her truma. They were married, and the Baal fed her truma, and the yavam is not feeding her truma. So that goes against what Rav Nachman quoted Shmuel as saying. So the Gemara says, no. That's not what. Let's tweak the statement of Rav Nachman a little bit. He didn't say that anytime the husband is feeding her truma, the yavam will feed her truma. Ema, what Shmuel meant was that kol biyasha bal ma'achil ba yavam ma'achil ba. That any type of bia that the husband would be able to feed her truma through, which means a real legitimate bia of a kinyan with chuppah, so then that type of bia, the yavam will be ma'achil, will feed her with. It has to be a legitimate bia, not just a bia of znut or a bia of ones, right? If someone is mikadesh a lady, or he marries a lady with a bia of znut or a bia of ones, that's not going to make a kinyan. So that's what Shmuel meant. And any bia that the husband wouldn't be ma'achil, the yavam wouldn't be ma'achil. That's what Shmuel meant. Okay, but either way, what are we saying? We're saying the machloket Rav and Shmuel, whether the yavam will feed her truma with a low-grade bia, with a bia of znut or a bia of shogeg, right? Rav says he feeds her truma. Shmuel says that he doesn't feed her truma with that type of bia. The machloket is in a case where he first does yibum. He first does the original husband was fully married to her. He did nisuin, and then he was niftar, and then the yavam did some type of bia grua, some type of low grade bia of bia shogeg or bia znut with the yavama. That's the case where we're having a machloket. So the Gemara says metve. Bad Yisrael pikachat shenit arsa lekohen pikach. We have to go a little bit fast. Bad Yisrael pikachat shenit arsa lekohen pikach. So a Bad Yisrael, the same case that we had before. Bad Yisrael to a kohen, they get engaged. Everybody is good. They're both all there. And when it came time for chuppah, he became a cheresh before the chuppah. So he no longer has dat in halacha, and he's not able to be koneher. So eina ochelet, she doesn't eat truma if that person was a kohen. Met v'nafla lifnei yavam cheresh. Now let's say that kohen cheresh who never really did a chuppah because his chuppah didn't count because he was a cheresh, he is niftar, and she falls to his brother who's also a cheresh. So ochelet, he does, even though he has no dat to, but still his bia causes her to eat truma. So bishlam lerav mitaretz kedetaretz meikara. According to Rav, we can explain like we explained earlier that, right, the way we answered for Shmuel in the first version, we could answer for Rav here in this version. That the case is really that he married her first and then he became a cheresh. So the kinyan was a good kinyan. They were fully married. She was eating truma, and then he became a cheresh and he was niftar. If that's the case, it's not a question on Rav, because the husband was able to feed her truma, so the yavam is also feeding her truma. But according to Shmuel, who Shmuel says even in a case of nisuin, in this version, even in a case of nisuin, where he was fully married to her and the husband was niftar and there was some type of bia grua, Shmuel says that's not enough to feed her truma. So in this case, why is she eating truma? Kasha. The Gemara says you're right. That's a question on Shmuel. Okay, let's go to the next. Let's try to make to the next two dots. The Gemara is just going to go through this braita, or a little similar braita. Tan Rabbanan. Bat Yisrael pikachat shenit arsa lekohen pikach. So you have a Bat Yisrael who accepts kiddushin from a kohen, and they're both fully there, 100%. And what happens? He becomes a cheresh before the time of chuppah. She does not eat truma. Nolad laben, if she has a son, ochelet, she could eat truma. The halacha is that if bat kohen, if she has a son, she eats truma because of her son. If she's a bat Yisrael who's married to a kohen, if she has a son, she eats truma because of her son. Met haben, if the son passes away, so Rabbi Natan omer ochelet, v'chachamim omrim eina ochelet. We have machloket Rabbi Natan and chachamim. If she had a son, and the son was causing her to eat truma, and then the son passes away. So the Gemara says, "My ta'amad Rabbi Natan." What's Rabbi Natan's reason that she should be allowed to eat even after the son is niftar? So Amar Rabba, ho'il shekvar achla. Rabba says, "Oh, she was already eating. Once she was already eating truma, so that which the son dies, we don't make her stop eating truma." Amar le Abaye. Abaye says, "Alamaat avad Yisrael shenised lekohen v'mit le'techol." If that's the case, you're going to say, oh, once she already started eating, she should continue eating. So a Bat Yisrael who is married to a Kohen, she already started eating. So she shouldn't stop eating. Once her husband passes away, she shouldn't stop eating. Shekvar achla. And then we know that that's not true. Only if she has a child does she continue eating if her husband passes away. So Ella, Kevan Demidle. So Abaye says, once the husband passes away, his kedusha leaves her, and she no longer is able to eat truma. So kedushatemina. Also, when she has a child, if that child is niftar, that removes the kedusha from her, and she's no longer able to eat truma. So if that's the case, why does Rabbi Natan say that she can eat truma after her child dies? Ela Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says that Kasav Rabbi Natan Nisue Cheresh Ma'achilin B'Truma. He holds that a Cheresh who has chuppah with a lady, that feeds her truma. He argues on the other Tanaim. He holds that. Right, until now we understood that if a cheresh is mekadesh a lady, if someone's mekadesh a lady, a kohen is mekadesh a lady, and he becomes a cheresh and he does chuppah, he can't that chuppah is not enough to feed her truma. Rabbi Natan holds it is enough to feed her truma. We don't make a gezerah of nisuei cheresh atu kiddushay cheresh. Amar le'abaye hachi nolad laben. If that's the case, why is he arguing? Why is he saying, oh, if she has a child and the child dies, why is Rabbi Natan talking about that case? Even if there's no child, he would be allowed to eat. She would be allowed to eat truma. So mishum Rabbanan. So the Gemara says we only say that case because of the Rabbanan, because the Rabbanan hold that even if she has a child but the child is niftar, she doesn't eat truma. V'liflog Rabbi Natan alayhu beresha. Why doesn't Rabbi Natan argue before the case of the child is even brought up? So Shavik Lulu Rabbanan Adusai Lemiltaihu V'Hadar Paligala. He lets the Rabbanan finish what they need to say, and then afterwards he says his opinion. The Gemara says, well, that's not really so clear in the Braita. Yachi Litni Meta Ben Ena Ochelet Rabbi Natan Omer Ochelet. It should have first said the opinion of Chachamim and then Rabbi Natan. It doesn't really say that. So the Gemara says, you're right, Kasha, not so clear. It's a Kasha on how we're explaining the Braita. Okay, so we'll stop here. I know we had to run through a little bit quickly last part, but B'ezras Hashem will continue tomorrow.